Yo, what's up guys? It's the new sensation, Big Annotation here, and today we're coming in with another CUMBER video, of course. It's been one of my favorite decks to play recently, so I've got to keep putting out the content for it. But recently, you guys might have seen I did a travel vlog for my trip to Poland for the Zenkai Showdown 2 event. And so this is actually going to be the deck profile and breakdown of the deck that I played in the actual event. And I managed to come top 8 with it, and that deck is obviously CUMBER. I have a lot of good things to say about this deck, and then one very big bad thing to say about the deck. We'll kind of get into that throughout the video. I know I've done a lot of CUMBER videos recently, so I will say this is kind of just going to be running through mostly just some updated changes that we've made to the list, me and Mikey together. And like not going too in depth on card choices or any sort of matchups or anything like that, because I feel like a lot of that is covered in the massive CUMBER guide that we did. So if you guys are really dedicated to this deck like I am, then I highly recommend going and checking out that video, which I'll stick a link for in the description as well, where me and Mikey basically break down like the strengths and weaknesses of this deck and how we feel like how we've basically evolved the deck in the process of building it that we've taken. But for now, I'll just kind of run you through my list real quickly, run you through my matchups as well, and just kind of talk about the few changes that we did end up making. So to start off with my matchups, I did cover this in the vlog as well, so if you guys want to see the vlog or you already have seen it, then I appreciate you guys watching obviously, but for those that haven't, there'll be a link in the description as well. But I ran through my matchups in there on the day. The matchups, I might be a little bit more hazy now, but I think round 1 I played against the starter deck Gohan leader, the green one, and managed to win that. Round 2 I played against SS3 ramp, managed to win that. Round 3 I played against Gamma. That was my first loss of the day. I feel like I made a pretty big misplay around setting up unexpected turn, and then he managed to punish me with arriving in a 7-drop on one of my turns to play the secret rare and clear my whole board when I was trying to go for a bit of a push. So a bit of a shame there. Probably just some fatigue setting in, because unexpected turn is a bit of a weird card to keep in mind all the time, but that's what we got to learn from. And then going into round 4, I played against I believe it was Green Videl. And then round 5, Green Master Roshi, won both of those games. And then round 6 was another Gamma, where I managed to win that one, making my ending the day 5-1 and going into top cut. And then in the top cut, my first round was against SS4, which is the big bad thing that I have to say about CUMBER, is the SS4 matchup is like awful, and me and Mikey have spent so much time trying to figure out how you can win that matchup, and we've got a couple of changes that we've made to try and make it a bit easier, and especially in a best of 1 format, the matchup is like sometimes winnable now, but in best of 3 it's like super tricky, because a lot of the matchup relies on surprise factor in the best of 1, and so when it comes to best of 3, like you'll win one of the first 2 games hopefully, and then if you get to the 3rd game, they already know how you're going to win, so they can very easily like side against it or just play around it a lot of the time. So it makes it a bit tricky, especially if they're siding against it. It's not really a win condition they can play around so easily, but siding against it is a big thing. So we'll get into that when we cover the changes that we made. But I'll get back into the deck. But overall, like top 8 with CUMBER is something I'm very happy with. I do think I will unfortunately be putting this deck down just for a little bit because of the SS4 matchup, and like it's not realistic to play this deck in a tournament and not play against SS4. So I think just in terms of, because I'll be playing against SS4 if I play this deck in any big tournaments, and because like I don't want to just go into a matchup where I instantly lose it. And that will happen if you play this deck against SS4, I feel like. So I will probably be taking a bit of a break from this deck for a while, but if SS4 gets addressed on the next ban list, I think this deck has a really strong chance. I can't think of a bad matchup for this deck outside of SS4. Like everything else feels fine. It feels at least manageable. So obviously we have the CUMBER leader, and then we have the Prison Planet. Like I said, I'm not going to be going over like what specific cards do or anything like that. I'll cover the Z deck very quickly because it's very standard, but these are obviously the leader and the field. We have the Z leader, 2 of the Fuzi battle card, which is the big overlord. And then to go with the food Z battle card, we have 2 of the Cumber so that you can always Z stack, and then 2 of the Majin Buu. Surmounting is really not necessary in this deck. You're quite happy to stay at high life if people leave you at high life, because this deck thrives on the mid and late game. So if you're not getting aggroed down, you really don't care about that too much. And the fact that your Z leader costs 1 energy to Z awaken means that if you wanted to go from 4 to 3, surmounting and this would cost 2 energy and 3 Z energy in a turn. And because this deck doesn't really build Z energy that quickly, and it also doesn't like it's a very energy hungry deck a lot of the time as well, until around turn 4 or 5, then you don't want to be spending 2 energy just to Z awaken when you can just do it during your opponent's turn. Like, you don't lose anything for doing it during your opponent's turn as opposed to doing it on your turn, really. So you're very happy to just leave an energy open to Z awaken on turns where you think they might go a bit more aggressive. So you don't need surmounting in this deck. And we also do run like some pseudo self-awakening in the main deck, in the form of like Power Burst and Support of the Dark Empire. So in theory, if your opponent is really just stalling you at 6 life and they're like only swinging at battle cards, once you get 5 in the drop, you have Power Burst to go down to 5 and then Token Negates to take yourself down for the rest of the way. So it's really fine, to be honest. You don't need surmounting. And the Majin Buu is super important because it gives you 2 opportunities of very easy and very cheap and very accessible Z battle card and SCR removal, which is something this deck struggles with, which is obviously what we've covered in the breakdown. Because those are cards that you can't overlord, your main form of removal just doesn't work against them, so you need like other alternatives. But that's the Z deck, pretty standard. I don't think it's changed at all. And then running through the main deck real quick, we have the very standard 8 cantrips. You need to see at least 1 cantrip in your opening hand to like stay efficient with the deck. Because you want to play a cantrip turn 1 and then combo it off for the Z energy so that you can play the Fu Z battle card, and then you can awaken turn 2. And ideally, especially against slower matchups, you want to be seeing 2 cantrips in your opening hand so that you can play another one on your turn 2. There are some times where you'd rather see a 6-drop, but the 6-drop is only live on your turn 2 if you've gone second, because your opponent has to have 2 or more energy and a battle card in play. So it's only really going second against more aggressive matchups that you'd rather see a 6-drop than a second cantrip. But you're always looking for at least 1 cantrip in the opening mulligan, if not 2. And these are just the best ones to play in my opinion, because the Evil Saiyan is a crazy good cantrip. It searches like your entire deck, searching 6 cost or less Saiyans, and then the fact that it also searches the Fu is like super generic. It's a really good. You've got so many search targets, like you never ever whiff off this card really. And then the 1-drop Goku is in there because of the accessibility to the Gogeta package, which we run. We don't run the Mai because running Mai and then running like the Vegito just puts more dead cards in your deck. And if you want to play Mai as a cantrip, you have to run the Vegito, which is just not a good card in my mind. And also, like, most of the time, you'd rather play the Trunks to your opponent's side of the board than the Mai, because it's an unexpected turn setup, whereas Mai is a 1-drop, so it doesn't set up the unexpected turn. It's a 1-cost 5k, so if you don't have the capabilities to instantly overlord it away, they can't just use it as a free combo. It still costs 1 to combo with. And it's still, like, not swinging at you because it's 10k, so you'd much rather play the Trunks. And then also the fact that searching top 5 is most of the time better than drawing a card, especially in this deck where like almost everything is searchable because it searches 6 cost or less Black Saiyans like the Evil Saiyan. So on that same vein of thought, we have the 4 Trunks. You want to be seeing these kind of every turn just so you can keep cycling your deck, but there are a lot of turns, like the main important turn to see this is turn 2, so that if your opponent doesn't play a battle card, you can awaken and still make use of the Overlord. But it's not super important if you don't see it. It's just like you don't get the +1 that you might get normally. But like this card and that cantrip are most of the time what you're searching in your opening hand. And past that, it's mostly just a free top 5 searcher. There are turns where, again, if your opponent doesn't have a board, or you've managed to establish multiple Overlords down, or you're just locking their board down to use the Z leader to combo off, there are turns where you'll still get the Overlord value off of this, but a lot of the time, like, you don't need to see it past turn 2 to keep just churning out that draw power and that value. And a nice thing about this is if you give it Servant and you have the Z leader on board, and this goes for any of the battle cards that you can give to your opponent, when you combo it off, you can then charge it to your own Z energy, so you can use it to fuel like your Margin Boos or your Fu if they remove it. And then we have the 4 Vegeta Negate. Like, again, you have to run 4, it's just a free Negate, it's crazy. And then 3 of the Goku. The Goku is like, the more I play it, it feels worse and worse in a lot of matchups, especially against SS4. This card is really, really bad, and I often side this down to 1 copy against SS4, because a lot of the time you use it to get out of an attack. Like, say you're awakened, you're on 15k, your opponent swings with one of their 20ks, you use this, very nice to get out of a 20k swing, go to 25 and give it to your opponent. The issue against SS4 is that they would have swung like 1 or 2 20ks in, you maybe negate an attack and then combo this to get out of the second attack, you give it to them, and then they just swing with it as a 10k double strike, combo off the guys that they just swung with, and then they're swinging at you with a big double strike, and it like doesn't actually do anything in that matchup is the annoying thing. The main thing that it's used for is the fact that you can tap 1 and play it as a 25k double striker and then like swing further. And to be honest, I've been using that effect a lot more than I expected to recently. Especially because now that I've been using the Fu TP rather than the trash 5-drop Fu, I've been actually able to abuse the fact that I have like multiple overlords on the board at times, and if my opponent doesn't have that much stuff on board to give Servant, then this is just a nice pay 1 for a 25k double striker and then swing with it and then overlord it away, which is very efficient. But yeah, sometimes this gets sided down to like 2 or 1 copy, especially against SS4. And then for the CUMBER stuff, 4 of the 6-drop, it's like such an efficient card in the early game. 19k dual attack to swing into opponent's battle cards or unisons is really, really strong. And then the fact that it gives something Servant on play to use as removal is really, really nice. And then the big boy, the 8-drop, again, this is your turn. Every turn from turn 4 onwards, this card is your play. And then just using it in combination with like getting multiple overlords out as well as the Z leader to just like get free value off your opponent playing stuff is really crazy. And then I was running 4 copies of the Fu TP. I only own 2, but shout out to Mikey for lending me the other 2 copies I needed for the event, and I do have 2 more coming in the post now, so I'm finally all sorted for Fu TPs. But it has been a long and fruitful journey trying to find this card. This card is insane. Like, when I got my second copy, and because I've been playing with 1 copy for so long, when I got my second copy, it felt like the deck was just suddenly broken. Against everything that wasn't SS4, I was like, my draw power just, like, it felt like it doubled almost. I was going from consistent 12 card hands to like 16 or 17, which is, yeah, this card is really, really insane. And then having 4 copies means that you have the flexibility to just like charge them sometimes if you see them in your hand. But yeah, when they come up, and they do come up like a lot in a lot of games because it's such a generic card, it's just it's a free like draw 2 15k. It's really, really insane. And then I had some games where they would even stick about on the board, and if they stick about, you can play another one because the overlord is once per turn rather than limit 1. It's the skill that plays them that's the limit 1. So with this card, you can, if you have copies stick around on the board, which I did at times during the tournament, you can just play another one, and then you're overloading 3 cards off, and you're drawing 3 cards per turn, or like 2 cards per turn if only one of the Fu sticks. It's really, really crazy. Yeah, this card is what makes the deck. It's what takes the deck to another level in the draw power in the deck. It's really, really crazy. And then the Gogeta package, we have the 1 thwarting still and the 2 fearless fusion. This card, it doesn't come up as much as I want it to, just because of the fact we can't fill our drop area, and the main thwarting targets are the Vegeta super combos to go with the cantrip. And so like we do have to use a super combo, and we want to like get a Gogeta out, and we kind of want to be using this defensively so as not to just like waste a super combo. So the fearless fusion doesn't come up as much as I want it to, because like, first of all, there's not too many barrier threats in the format right now, I feel like. Other than against yellow, this card is crazy, but I haven't really played against any yellow decks with this deck yet. And against the Birisi battle card, it's really nice, but that is kind of it. And against the Birisi battle card, like against blue in general, you're not going to be forced to use your super combo until quite late like a lot later into the game than against a lot of other decks. And so it means if they drop in early enough to see battle card Beerus, then Fearless Fusion is kind of useless against it, which is my only issue with this card mainly. But it's still really good. Like anytime you use it, it feels insane. And even if you're not using it to remove like barrier battle cards, just the fact that it removes a 4 cost or less a lot of the times just comes up. And then the fact it's a 16k blocker or a swinger, like you have some really nice kill turns where you can go wide with like an Overrealm. And speaking of which, we have the Beyond All Limits and the Vegeta now. The Vegeta is an insane addition to the deck. The fact that you can Overrealm Vegeta fairly early on in the game just to kill a battle card, and then your kill turn suddenly becomes Overrealm this, grab this back, pay 1 to play this, and then you can start playing combinations of the Gogetas as well. You can play your 8-drop Cumber, you can play your Fu just to draw more cards if you're swinging through Floodgates, which a lot of the time if my opponent dropped Defending Friends, I just let it resolve, save the counterplay for their like Android 14 if I'm against Gamma, and then just swing through it and use the Fu to draw more cards so that I could keep swinging through. Yeah, the kill turns in this deck are really fun to pull off, and you can actually do a lot for how kind of little it feels like the deck does a lot of the time in terms of like developing a board. The kill turns, yeah, they can be really insane. In terms of the main deck negates, I'm running 2 Power Bursts and 1 Support of the Dark Empire. The reason behind this is originally I was on 2 and 2, but because I found out that the top cut was best of 3, I decided to take the second Support of the Dark Empire into the side deck and run a Gohan Ray in the main, which is a new addition to the side deck. And the reason behind this is because I felt like in the top cut against the red matchups, I would want a copy of this in the main board so that I could use it in game 1 in the best of 3. But because the Swiss rounds was best of 1 pre-side, it didn't matter that I had this split in the main, because I could swap the Gohan Rare out for a token negate if I felt like I needed it. The Gohan Rare is a card that I really want to find space for in the main deck just as a one-off, and then side deck the second, but I don't know what else I'd cut. And I feel like 2 token negates, whilst I hate the card this format, I feel like token negates are losing a lot of value right now. Unless you're in like specifically, you're playing them in an aggressive deck. It feels like they're not great, but I still feel like you need to, because the sparking on Power Burst is not always live because you don't fill up your drop area that much, and then on top of that, when you do fill up your drop area, a lot of the time you just Overrealm because you want to be efficient with your Overrealms because you're probably playing 2 per game. So that's my main issue with this, is kind of like the fact that Power Burst isn't always live, support doesn't feel as good as Power Burst, and you can't ever play it for 1 because it's a 2-drop. And then the Gohan Rare is like a weird middle ground kind of thing. But it's searchable, which is nice. So I do want to find space for a Gohan Rare in the main. I feel like you still need 2 support just because of the fact you don't fill up your drop area enough for the sparking to always be live. But yeah, that's a big issue that I have with the deck right now, is the negate lineup. None of the negates feel like amazing. Power Burst is really good, but it's not consistently live for taking a life for the sparking. That's my main issue with it. And then the support, you can't play that for 1, and a lot of the time you want to be playing it for 1, and also the token just dies. Like, support is only really used to get out of like double strike or triple strike swings, really. And then another one of which we have in the deck now is the Black Mask Saiyan Assassin from the Darkness. This is mainly in there for originally it was mainly in there for Golden Frieza, because it's really good against the Gohan Unison when they give it triple attack. The fact that you can give plus 5k to your leader, and by that point you're probably Z Awakening too, so you become 25k base, and then you're saving so many cards in your hand from their like potential 6 swings with the triple attack on the Gohan Unison, or 9 swings if they have like 2 copies in hand, on top of the copy that they probably already have on the board. So this card was originally put in because of that, but it's just like all round a very, very good card for the deck, I think. Against SS4, if you're Z Awakened, you go up to 25k, and that takes away a lot of the pressure, because a lot of their base swings are going to be 20k, unless they're going for the 8-drop or the secret rare. And so yeah, this card does a lot in those specific matchups, and it's just a nice card to have in general. Going to 20k when you're not Z Awakened, like early on, or 25k when you are Z Awakened, and then having the potential to then free combo with your Z Leader really puts off a lot of the pressure that your opponent would otherwise apply. I still feel like you only need one of this. Same logic with the Gohan rare, why I only want to find space for one copy of this in the main. They're both searchable, so you don't need more than one, and then in the matchups where you need more than one, you just side the second copy in. But they're searchable, so in game ones, this deck is insanely efficient at facilitating the fact that you can just run one-offs of cards and then just like search them in the matchups you need them, which is really, really helpful. And then Unexpected Turn. We've been through this. This card is, yeah, this is the tech. And then the final two cards of the deck, the finishers, one Crack in Space Time, you're a Black Saiyan Leader. And the newest card, and probably the biggest change that I've made personally, is the Golden Cooler. So me and Mikey were talking about this for a bit, and we've gone very back and forth on this, is the idea of running Golden Cooler, because I found like the Evil Saiyan SCR never really had any like actual synergy with the deck. Like in Supreme Kai, it's great because you can mill it and then play it from your warp. But in this deck, you don't have any mill. You don't really have any like discard effects. There are some like petrification in the sideboard, but that never, like, it's very, very situational. And it's at best it's like a +1 because you discarded the Evil Saiyan. It's not like you're kind of searching it by milling it, which is much more beneficial than just discarding it when you would otherwise have to discard another card. Whereas this card, it can just like win games on its own. And what I also started to find when testing this was that because CUMBER draws such a massive hand size, what you can do sometimes is, even if you know your opponent has a card like Dirty Burst, if you're in a slower matchup especially, you can just drop this on like turn 5 or 6, depending on how defensive your hand is looking and whether you need that extra energy for defense. You can just drop this on turn 5 or 6, just use it to clear your opponent's hand out. Sure, they Dirty Burst it, but they go down to 5 cards in hand, and then they instantly have to remove this guy, because otherwise it's like an infinite blocker because of the Z energy they'll have. And then, yeah, they go down to 5 cards in hand. You're sat there at like maybe 12 or 13 cards in hand, and it's like, even if they have a really aggressive turn next turn, you have free Vegeta Negate, you have Token Negate, Sparking 5 with the Power Bursts. If you go for this on turn 6, you have an energy open for a power burst. You potentially have Gohan Ray, you have Unexpected Turn if you have an energy open as well. And then you also just have like a 12 or 13 card hand, which probably has 4 super combos in because you're searching them, and a 20k base C Leader. So it's very hard to kill you once you drop this card. And also the big reason why I wanted to include it was this is the win condition against SS4. The SS4 matchup in game 1 especially, where they don't see it coming so much, is the entire game plan is just to stall for turn 5 and draw this card. That is the win condition. Unfortunately, I have not found any other way to win against that deck yet. It is really, really hard. So let me know in the comments if you guys have been playing this deck and you have found any sort of way to beat that deck, because I don't know anymore. I'm losing a lot of faith because of that one matchup. But this is a very nice win condition if they're not expecting it. If they are expecting it, and it's exactly what happened to me in the top 8, I dropped this card and then instantly got Violent Race. And that does not feel good at all, especially when you're sat there on 1 life, so you just die next turn. I know Mikey is still very, he likes the idea of the Evil Saiyan SCR, and I still think the Evil Saiyan SCR is extremely good in this deck. I do think that it kind of depends on player preference and playstyle. For me personally, I'm a hard control player. I love control, and I love the ability to kind of pivot between aggression and control. But I especially just love playing hard control decks, and this leans into that. This just goes, as long as I can get to like turn 5 or 6, I can just drop their entire hand, and then sit there and I'll have more cards in hand than them for the rest of the game, because this deck at least matches a lot of the other decks' draw powers in this game, if not has more draw power. So just by putting them down to 5 cards, they can never recover from that, and then you just grind them out from there, even if you don't kill them with the Golden Cooler. And so that's what I like about this card. If you're a more aggressive player and you just want to go for like maybe turn 4 kills, or like even sometimes turn 3 kills if you see your SCR, then absolutely play Evil Saiyan. And there are definitely some matchups like Gamma, or yeah, mostly just blue matchups to be honest, where the Evil Saiyan SCR feels a lot better. especially Gamma, because of the fact that Gamma has a small inherent hand size anyways, so you don't get much of this card anyways. And then the Dirty Burst means that you're not swinging with this card, so this card at best is like a discard 4 for your opponent, but a lot of the time it's like a discard 2 or 3, which is not great. Whereas the Evil Saiyan can warp your opponent's life, it can really put on the pressure for those kill turns, and then it can also stop the first floodgate that they play each turn because of the ruling about the autos following the card when you take it because you're turn player. So Evil Saiyan is definitely a lot better for Gamma, and that is the one matchup that makes me want to play Evil Saiyan over this card, but I think just because of the SS4 matchup, I was really sold on playing this card, just because it felt like the only way to win against that deck. But it still doesn't always win against that deck because of cards like Violent Rays. So yeah, you can't rely on it, unfortunately, and that's why I feel like you can't rely on CUMBER right now in general as a deck to play in like a big tournament, to be honest. It's just that one SS4 matchup. If you can figure out that matchup, then absolutely play this deck, because this deck, it feels like it beats everything else, to be honest, or at least stays on par with it. Going into the side deck, we're on 2 Super Kamehameha. It's just for Gamma, basically. Any sort of floodgate decks. I don't feel like you ever need 3 of this. It gets to the point where you build up like three counterplays, being a combination of the Super Kamehamehas and the unexpected turns. You'll build up about 3 of them in your hand before you start actually having to use them against Gamma, because you don't have the pressure to like force them to really blow any important floodgates until like turn 5-6. So 2 of this is fine. And then 2 Ultimate minus Energy Powerball. Cut this down from 3 copies because we're not running the Unison anymore. We're not going for that like aggressive strategy against SS4 because that didn't really work out. It was fine, but it's very coin flippy. If they find any way to kill the Unison on turn 2 or 3, or if their Unison lives for your turn 2, you instantly lose the game, unfortunately. There is no coming back. And a lot of the times now SS4 players are awakening on turn 2 with their Unison and just leaving an energy up for the Gohan counterplay, and that completely ruins that strategy because you can't establish a 6-drop against that card, and you need the 6-drop for the Unison to be useful, and then you need the 6-drop and the Unison combo to kill their Unison and to kind of establish that aggressive board presence. And if you can't establish that and you can't kill their Unison, you just lose with that strategy, unfortunately. And that's why I don't think we can go down the Unison route anymore, because of that Gohan counterplay existing now. So we've cut the Unisons out the sideboard, and then because of that we've cut this down to 2, because we only ever sided in 2 copies of this against Red Sin, and we only ever sided in 3 copies against SS4 because it was free with the Unison. But because we don't play the Unison anymore, and we probably don't even side this against SS4 anymore, because we have the Gohan rare, which kind of does the same thing against Rush Attack, and against SS4 this is only hitting Rush Attack, then you just don't need the 3rd copy. You could also argue that you can also side in the Gohan rares against Sin instead of this card, and I've kind of been toying with the idea of just siding in both and seeing how it works. But to be honest, I haven't tested a huge amount against Sin with the new changes, just because it's always felt like a decent matchup for CUMBER. It's always felt like a pretty free matchup, so it's not been one that I've needed to test against all that much. And then, like I said, the 2nd copy of the Token Negate is in here because we couldn't find space for it in the main, and it's best of 1 pre-side, and I'd rather have the Gohan rare in the main for that game 1 against Red in best of 3 when it comes to the top cut. And then to follow that up with, we have the 2nd copy of the Gohan rare. You want to side this in against Red, SS4, Sin, any other Red decks really. The fact that you can combo it against Rush Attack when you're Z-Awakened, and then pay 1 to remove the Rush Attack, so it acts the same as the Ultimate minus Energy Powerball. If your opponent swings with a Rush Attack that doesn't have barrier yet, like they swing before using the activate main, it's great. But this card is also especially good against SS4 because it means you don't have to worry about their secret rare and just hold negates in hand, because if you see a copy of this, you can just Gohan rare from drop or warp, and you don't, like, whenever they swing with the Quad Strike secret rare, you just Gohan rare, and then it doesn't matter what they took out your hand, because a lot of the times I was finding if they took the 1 free Vegeta negate out of my hand in that matchup, because this deck doesn't run a huge number of extra card negates, if they take the 1 free negate of the Vegeta out my hand, I don't have any other negates in hand, and I just die to the secret rare, which is exactly what happened in game 1 of in game 1 of the top 8 match that I played, I just died to the secret rare. I didn't have a negate, and this card just saves you against that kind of situation. And then going forward, we have 2 Bardock Overrealm. Again, this is for mostly SS4. It can be nice in some other aggressive matchups, maybe like Supreme Kai as well. But it's mainly there for SS4, just to drop it on the turn going into their turn 4. So your turn 3 or turn 4, depending on who goes first or second. And it just means that their 8-drop doesn't really do anything, which is very helpful. And it also means, like, if they want to go wide, that also doesn't really do anything. So this card is just insane. And again, it's searchable. And then the second copy of the Black Mask Saiyan, this is mainly for Golden Frieza to deal with that Gohan Unison, or any other yellow deck that might be siding into the Gohan Unison or focusing around it. And it's also nice, again, against SS4, you want to side in this so that you can go to 25k on the Z leader. And then I'm running 2 Petrification. This was kind of for the Android 21 matchup. When they drop the 8-drop, you just kind of stop it. You don't discard for the auto when you counterattack, and then they also don't untap 5, so it kind of stops a lot of their offense and then stops a lot of their defense on the same turn. It also can be nice against Gamma with the 9-drop Cell, but I don't think you need it. I think token negates work just as well against 9-drop Cell, because you can token negate, take a life, and then block the second attack with the token, and they don't really have removal for the token outside of a Beerus tap 2 with the Z battle card. So you don't really need to worry about that. So I don't feel like you need to side this in against Gamma, really. But it's mainly there for Android 21, and then also against Golden Frieza, or any other deck that might be running this card, because this card's dumb. Sure, they take you down to 5 cards in hand, but then if you can Petrification and then follow it up with your own Golden Cooler, and they don't have a response to it, you just win the game. And a lot of the times when they drop Golden Cooler, they are just going all in for the game that turn. Unless you're playing against, again, Golden Frieza, where they can then untap 2 and then Cold Bloodlust your Golden Cooler. But then they have to just have it. But yeah, that's kind of the theory behind Petrification. And it's also, it can be quite nice against cards like Beast Gohan as well. But with any of those SCRs, ideally you want to unexpected turn them. But if you can't unexpected turn them, then you have Petrification as kind of a secondary backup. And then we have 2 Mechikabura the Broken Seal. I personally really hate this card, but I don't know what I replace it with, and on the day I couldn't think of a card to replace this with. I know Mikey is a big fan of it for the Android 21 matchup, because you can call 4-drop Android 21 and stop all of their defense and all of their offense on the same card, especially combined with Petrification, because then if they go for an 8-drop, they just, yeah, again, they lose their turn. And it also can be nice against SS4 Gogeta, because you can just stop the 8-drop coming down, and you can kind of juggle this with the Bardock Overrealm, because both of them stop you from playing the copies of that card for the next turn. So you can have a turn where you Bardock Overrealm, and then next turn you Meki, and then next turn you Bardock Overrealm, next turn you Meki. But to be honest, the 8-drop, whilst it's an incredibly broken card for that matchup, it's not like it's an issue for that matchup, but it still doesn't solve the matchup. So if you tap 2 for 8-drop to cool 8-drop Gogeta GT in that matchup, they can still play, and they can still very easily kill you. Which is why I much prefer the Bardock Overrealm, because it stops the 8-drop and it also stops them going wide. But Meki doesn't feel as good. I just don't like this card in this deck. I feel like it's too heavily costed for what it does. There are some matchups where it's very nice, like again against Android 21, but I feel like right now it's not the format for Meki, to be honest. In this deck specifically. In maybe some blue decks, you can probably get away with it. But yeah, personally, I don't like this card too much. And we also don't have a lot of Android 21 in Europe, because I feel like a lot of people think that the deck is a bit shit, which I personally agree with. So yeah, maybe we don't need to prepare for Android 21. And either way, I still feel like we don't need this card to win the Android 21 matchup necessarily. And then last card, which was a very last minute inclusion from myself. I literally messaged Mikey about this on the morning of the event, I think, or the morning before the event, where I was already in Poland and he was still traveling up. Because I thought of this card and I realized this card is really nice against Golden Frieza, because it hits their leader skill to be untapping all the time. And it's also a Vegeta Xeno 5k, so it's another target for thwarting, which you could combo with a lot earlier than your super combos. And so you can actually bring out like Thwarting and Fearless Fusion a lot earlier in some matchups where you might want to. But it's also really nice against Golden Freezer, and it's also really nice against certain blue decks. It came in really clutch for me against the SS3 ramp matchup, because they were untapping 3 at the end of every turn, they'd warp 1, and then if they wanted to untap with their Boo Unison, which they also managed to draw, they'd warp another one because it was start of my main phase rather than end of their turn. So yeah, this card put in the work for that, and again, it's searchable because it's a Black Saiyan. So that's the sideboard. The main thing I would change is the Mechis. And then if there's like any way to beat the SS4 matchup, I'd take out a lot of some of these cards for the whatever the fuck beats SS4, to be honest. But like the Gohan Rares, the Bardoks, the Black Marseillans are mostly in there for SS4. The Black Marseillan, like they're all very good cards on their own, but they're mainly in there for SS4. And without SS4 existing, they would go down to lower ratios probably. But yeah, it's mainly just an issue with that SS4 matchup that I still need to figure out, and that's why I'll take a brief break from the deck probably, because it feels very, very unwinnable, and I just don't know how to solve it. We have tried a lot, and none of it works, unfortunately. But let me know how you guys have been dealing with the SS4 matchup down below, because I am clearly struggling. If you guys have any sort of suggestions or solutions, I would much appreciate it, massively appreciate it. I've been really enjoying this deck and I don't want to put it down, but I do feel like because of that SS4 matchup, it might have to be put onto the back burner for a brief period of time whilst I prepare for some more upcoming events. But we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll be back on CUMBER, who the hell knows. And I still really enjoy the deck. I'll definitely be always thinking about it and like trying to figure out new builds for the deck. But yeah, I think I've played so much CUMBER recently, and maybe it's time for me to move on for a little bit. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the deck profile. Like I said, if you guys want to find out more about the way that I've been playing CUMBER, you guys can check out the massive explanation deep dive video that me and Mikey did. You can check that out down below. And if you want to see my experience in Poland, then you can check out the vlog as well. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was my top 8 CUMBER deck profile, and I will catch you guys in the next one.